All right. So today, everybody, we're going to be doing Unit 5, Lesson 42. Gregor Mendel, Mendel's P's, Mendel's laws, and complete dominance. We're going to hit all those topics today. This is the beginning of the main event of this unit. We will be discussing genetics and heredity all the way up to November 30th. This was recorded in 2023. It is November 7th. Your test is on December 1st. The bulk of this unit is this content right here. Okay, here we go. This is Gregor Mendel. And he was born in 1822 and he passed in 1884. So he's a 19th century kind of guy. He is considered the father of modern day genetics. When I say evolution and natural selection, who's the first scientist that comes to mind? Who? Say what? What? Oh yeah, considered. Thank you. Who's considered the father of evolution and natural selection? Daniel? It's Charles Darwin. Darwin is to evolution what Gregor Mendel is to genetics. Pretty important guy. And as a matter of fact, they lived at the same time. If they had known of each other's existence and each other's work in the field of biology, I mean, you want to talk about an Avengers team up, that would have been it. But unfortunately, Gregor Mendel lived in Austria, not Australia, Austria, which is next door to Germany. He was an Austrian monk. Darwin was in England. And Gregor Mendel studied genetics as a hobby. He was the first scientist to use math in biology. And so with that being said, I want to tell all of you that in this unit, there will be math. The only math you've really had to this point is water potential, but you will have more of it this unit, basic algebra, add, subtract, multiply, divide, but you also need to be able to square and square root. So I need everybody to be bringing a calculator to class every day starting tomorrow, and your phone doesn't count. It needs to be a legit calculator. You will need it. In his experiments, he used pea plants. Now, I'll explain later why of all organisms did he choose pea plants. We'll get to that. That's just a really quick, simplistic bio of the father of modern day genetics. Now, before Gregor Mendel, there's a lot of ideas that society clinged onto and just expected to be true. Give you an example. The Earth is the center of the universe, not just the solar system, the universe. I mean, you want to talk about humans have a little bit of self-importance. We thought we were the middle of everything. Until Galileo and his telescope looked up at the night sky and he saw the planet Jupiter. He saw these little things orbiting Jupiter. What were those? It's moons. Jupiter has dozens of moons. And he realized smaller objects orbit around larger objects. Well, the sun is certainly larger than us. The sun doesn't orbit around us. We orbit around it. So that was science finding the truth. And then there was a notion that the Earth is flat, which some people still believe today. It blows my mind. Well, they would thought that people thought that if you sail too far off the map, you're going to fall right off. That didn't happen. So I want you guys to understand the prevailing thought. Everybody knew that the Earth was the center of the universe. Everybody knew that the Earth is flat. And then the scientific method and research and experiments proved those incorrect. Well, also, everybody knew that offspring was composed of traits that was an intermediate of the parents. You know, look at me, air quotes. Everybody knew this. So if you had a tall parent and a short parent, the offspring is going to be somewhere in between. If you had a parent that was blonde, a parent that was brunette, the offspring's hair is going to be somewhere between. Now, John, you're a tall guy. Are you taller than both your parents?
One of them.
Yeah. How much shorter are you than your dad? Are you right in the middle of your mom and dad, or are you closer to one parent? Okay. Lucas, how about you? You're a tall guy. Are you taller than both? Yeah, I am too. Is anybody else taller than both parents? Is anybody shorter than both parents? So clear examples that you're not in between. But this is 2023. We're talking in the 1800s, 1700s even. So this is before Gregor Mendel. Everybody, air quotes, knew that this was the law of the land. This is called the blending concept of inheritance. This is prior to Mendel in his work. The blending concept of inheritance states that offspring's traits are an intermediate of the parent's traits. So as I said, an example of this would be if you have a tall mom and a short dad, that results in medium height offspring. Or if you have a red flower and a white flower, that would result in pink flowers. And that does happen in nature, but they thought that this happened in everything. Okay. Well, then riddle me this. What about when you have a pink flower? So hold on, I'm going to write but. What about if you have a pink flower and a pink flower? You get red, white, and pink flowers. Explain that. The blending concept of inheritance says pink and pink should just make pink. There's no differences between the parents, so they shouldn't be able to make differences. That would be like saying that how in the world did two brunettes make a blonde? Do any of you blonde kids have brunette parents? Look at that. So the blending concept of inheritance doesn't appear to hold up because that whole notion doesn't explain pink flower, making red and white flowers. It doesn't explain a brunette mom, a brunette dad making a blonde offspring. So I want to tell you guys why it is very important to understand that it doesn't happen. And it has to do with natural selection and evolution. I mentioned this before. All of you look different than any other human on Earth because you guys have mutations that no one else has. This is due to natural variations within the genetic code and within every population. Here in high school, people tend to have little high school crushes. Some people end up living with each other happily ever after. Well, you might have a crush on person A and not person B because person A has traits that you find attractive and desirable, and person B doesn't have traits that you find attractive and desirable. And that's okay. You're allowed to say so-and-so is cute, so-and-so, that's variation, guys. In nature, there are deer. They fight each other for a female, and someone wins. The winner might be bigger, stronger, more aggressive, bigger antlers. The loser may not have those qualities. And typically in nature, the female breeds with the winner because she wants her offspring to have those winner genetics. That is due to variation. Most football games, basketball games, baseball games, they don't end in a tie. Most. Because one team may have athletes that are superior to the other. That's variation. If let's see, Casey, if I was in high school with you and I was as tall as a high schooler as I am now, if we were on the sidelines for somebody picking teammates for a basketball game, they're probably going to pick me underneath the rim instead of you. I'm taller, but maybe you're faster. Maybe you dribble better. We all have our gifts. We call them gifts. In biology, they're traits, they're advantages, and we try to utilize them to our benefit. This concept says there should be nothing better than the other because eventually everything is going to be the same. If you give it generation after generation, maybe hundreds and hundreds of years, everything will be a level playing field. We know that's not the case. I look around this room, I got tall kids, short kids, blonde kids, brunette kids, blue eyes, brown eyes, weird looking kids and weirder looking kids. You're my students, I'm allowed to pick on you. Everybody's different. And that's due to this not being so. And so I just want to further prove my point here. And I'm going to use Mr. LeBron James as an example of this. This is wrong, by the way, okay? This has not happened. Let's say that Mr. LeBron James, and I know this for a fact, he is 6'8". And he actually married his high school sweetheart. And I do not know her name. I do not know her height. So I'm going to make some stuff up. We're going to say his wife. I'm just going to make something up. Let's say that she's 5'7". Okay. Their first child is LeBron Jr. He goes by Bronny. I do not know his height, but I'm just going to kind of play with these numbers here. Let's just say that Bronny is somewhere in between his mom and his dad's height. So what do you think is good height approximately between 5'7" and 6'8"? Like 6'2". So let's say that Bronny, LeBron Jr., is 6'2". Okay. Let's say Bronny Jr. meets a girlfriend and they end up being high school sweethearts too, and she is 5'6". So they end up happily ever after, and they're going to have a child. Can you give me a height that's somewhere between 6'2" and 5'6"? Like 5'10"? And let's say that this individual finds the person of their dreams, and that person is going to be 5'6". What's between 5'10" and 5'6"? 5'8". See what's happening here? You're narrowing it down. And you give it a few hundred years, everybody's going to be the same. Well, we certainly know by just observing nature, not everything is the same. No way. So this does not work. This is wrong. And Gregor Mendel wanted to put it to the test, not just say, oh, that's wrong. You got to be able to prove it. And so now Gregor Mendel sought to test this concept. He didn't seek to prove it wrong. He just wanted to test it. And that's the thing about science, guys. The mission of science is not to prove something right, not to prove something wrong. You're just trying to find the truth. And you have to accept that fact. If he did his experiments and the blending concept of inheritance was verified, then the grass is green, the sky is blue. You can't refute the facts. So science is not about proving something wrong. He just wanted to test this. So Mendel sought to test the blending concept of inheritance. If Rachel wanted to put her science jacket on, her lab coat, and say, which pizza place in South Tampa is known for the most calories? She could try Sally O'Neill's, she could try Cappy's, she could try those places on Del Mabry. You can put that to the test. But what you can't do is which one tastes better. That's an opinion. But you can do calories as numbers, and you can quantify that. And Rachel should not be out to say, I'm going to prove that Sally's is the least caloric. You can't prove that unless it is a fact. So what Gregor Mendel decided to use are his pea plants. And why would he do that? Well, there's some reasons for his using the pea plants. One is they reproduce quickly. You don't have to wait weeks and months for it. They're easy to experiment on. They're not exactly going to run away from you. They have multiple traits that you can test. They have different colors, different heights. Peas can be wrinkled or round. Pea pods can be wrinkled or solid, like not wrinkled. They can have purple flowers or white flowers. There's so many different traits that you can test. And they self-fertilize. This is not asexual reproduction. This is the male and female parts of the plant are on the same plant. Some plant species have male and females, and they need pollinators like bees and butterflies. Pollen is like sperm. It is plant sperm. So in March, if you have allergies to pollen and your car is covered in that yellow stuff, that's the trees are breeding. That's tree sperm. And so under normal conditions, everybody, without Gregor Mendel's intervention, here's what happens with the plants, okay? If you have a short plant, and if it self-fertilizes, Emerson, what would you expect a short plant to make if it self-fertilizes? Short would make short. Makes perfect sense to me. Sam, if I have a tall pea plant, and if it self-fertilizes, what would you expect a tall pea plant to produce? Another tall. It's just making more of itself. And again, this is not asexual reproduction. So this is normal conditions, guys. They pollinate themselves. The male and female parts are on the same plant. But now, here's what Gregor Mendel is going to do. And here's your first important concept to grasp. Mendel conducted reciprocal crosses. You scratch my back, I scratch yours. You buy lunch today, I buy lunch tomorrow. You pay for the Bucks tickets this week, I'll pay for the next home game. That is a reciprocal cross. What you do to one, you must do to the other. And so what Gregor Mendel did is he manually took pollen, which is basically sperm. He took pollen from one plant and introduced it to the female parts, which is called the pistil, of the opposite plant. This would not be done naturally. This is Gregor Mendel literally taking pollen from a short, putting into the pistil of a tall, taking the pollen of a tall and putting into the pistil of a short. He does cross breeding. And so here's what his experiment looked like, guys. Here is this is going to be the P generation. This is hopefully going to start your new terminology. The P generation is the first generation. P stands for parents, not pea plants. If your parents were the P generation, then you would be the one after that. And there is a name for that, but I'll get to that in a moment. So here's what he did. So let's say he took the male gametes of a short. He's going to cross it with the female gametes of a tall. And then he does the opposite. He's going to take the male gametes of a tall and he is going to introduce that to the female parts of a short. Now, according to the blending concept of inheritance, what type of offspring should the short and the talls make? Medium. Not a single one ended up like this. And he made hundreds and hundreds of seeds. Not a single one was medium. Not one. And this next generation is called the F1 generation. If your parents are the T generation, then you guys are the F1 generation. This is the offspring of P. We call it F1 or familial one. Yes, Catherine. You would be astonished at what people see with their own eyes, but they still don't believe. And so what he wanted to do is he wanted to perform a scientific experiment to put it to rest. Catherine, I could say the grass is green, the sky is blue, and there are people who go, no, it isn't. The world, I mean, it is 2023. There's a flat Earth society. All the offspring were tall. 100% was tall when he crossed male short and female long, or female tall. And when he crossed male tall and female short, it was 100%. So this produced two questions for Mr. Mendel, or two outcomes, I should say. One is a question. Number one, the blending concept of inheritance is invalid. And number two, what happened to the short trait? I mean, seriously, where did it go? It's the outcomes are all tall. He didn't know yet, but he's going to. Some of you may remember your days of freshman bio and you know what's about to happen. And that's good. You remember. I see some hands going up. He continues this. And so what he allows now, guys, is he allows, Mendel allows what we call these are the F1 plants to self-pollinate like they normally do. And that's their natural way to reproduce. He's not going to cross breed. He's going to let them do their natural thing. And these offspring will be the F2 generation. So if your parents are the P generation, you guys are F1, your children will be F2. So F2 is the offspring of F1. And by the way, when I start getting into generational genetics, you're going to need to know P, F1, F2, so on and so on and so on. There's F3, F4, F5, F6, F7, all the way. So for those of you that may recall your days of freshman bio, do you remember what the outcome was when he allowed an F1 tall to cross with itself? Anybody remember? You do? They were short and tall. Do you remember what the ratio was? No, not 50-50. 75-25. So he let them reproduce with themselves. Just trying to hustle. My plants are looking ugly. He made thousands of seeds, and out of this, it was a 3-to-1 ratio. For every 3 tall, there was 1 short. And so that's a 75-25. 75% tall, 25% short. So this helped him realize 2 things, everybody. One is that traits can skip generations. Do any of you have a trait that is seen in your grandparents but not in your parents? What is it, Catherine? Your nose. Okay. Anything else? Yeah. Height. Okay. It can skip a generation. And 2, some traits are completely dominant to other traits. In this case, what trait is more dominant when you talk about height? What form of height? Tall or short? What's dominant? Tall. And so this led Gregor Mendel to formulate your first major concept, guys. And this one sometimes goes in one ear and out the other. This is called the complete dominant pattern of inheritance. You may have heard of incomplete dominance, which we will get to later. A lot of kids remember that, but they don't remember this. When you have one trait completely masking another trait, that is known as complete dominance. In pea plants, height is a complete dominant trait. tall, completely overwhelmed short. So one form of a given trait masks the other form. That other form is considered recessive. So what do you call the form that overwhelms the other? Dominant. Dominant masks recessive. We will get to incomplete dominance, but I want to stress to all of you that so many students forget that complete dominance is actually a thing. One trait masks another. Here's an example. How many of you have brunette parents, but they produced a blonde child? Anybody? Okay. I mentioned that earlier. That's brown is typically dominant to brunette. All right, wait, brown is dominant to blonde. It is possible for two brunettes to make a blonde, and we will get to that starting tomorrow. But let me ask you this. Are there any students here who are brunette and they have two blonde parents? I did not think so. Because can you have two parents that have a recessive trait, have a child that has the dominant trait? No, because they don't have the dominant trait. You can't have what you don't have. We'll get into all this stuff as we go. So the last part of today is through all this work, Gregor Mendel was able to formulate two laws. These are two very famous laws, and we call them Mendel's laws. This is all subscribing to Mendelian genetics, and one of them is one you guys have already gotten. Besides crossing over, what other phenomenon allows for offspring to be very different from their parents besides crossing over? Bingo. This was one of Mendel's laws, the law of independent assortment. This law states that most traits are inherited independently of other traits. The fact that Daniel back there has brown hair has nothing to do with the fact that when he's 35 years old, he's going to go bald. One has nothing to do with the other. The fact that, Catherine was saying she inherited her grandparents' nose, that has nothing to do with the fact she's a girl. Those traits are independent of each other. You can be tall and have that nose, or short with that nose, or a girl with that nose, boy with that nose. You have blue eyes with that nose, brown eyes with that nose. They're independent. And the other one you guys that have not gotten yet is the law of segregation. This law states, and this is new for you guys, that during meiosis, traits segregate so offspring inherit half of what each parent has. Now, what happens first? Meiosis or having offspring? Meiosis does, because meiosis makes gametes. Some of you might be a parent one day. What percent of your genetics will be passed on to the next generation? 50%. Your genetics are going to separate from each other. All of you have two copies of every gene. You got one from mom, one from dad. Well, you're not going to pass on both copies. You're going to pass on half of that. And so to try to explain this, and I'm going to do my best to explain this in the coming days, I'm going to use myself as an example. I'm going to talk about eye color and eye color in my family, okay? So the key here to try to help me explain the law of segregation, I'm going to use a capital A represents brown eyes. A lowercase a represents green eyes. And a lowercase b represents blue eyes. Now, this list here is a hierarchy. Brown is the most dominant. It wins over everything else. Blue is the most recessive. That means you have to have 2 copies of blue to actually be blue. So let me ask you this, guys. If you inherit a brown and a green-eyed gene, what will your eye color be? Brown. What if you inherit a brown and a blue-eyed gene? What will your eye color be? What if you inherit a green and a blue-eyed gene? What will your eye color be? Okay, I want to make sure you understand this. So this is in my family, and all of you know your family. My dad has green eyes. So I know that he has that allele. My mom has blue eyes. In order for my mom to have blue eyes, what must she have inherited from both parents? She had to have gotten a blue from her mother and a blue from her father. Now look at me. What color eyes do I have? I have blue. So my dad has green. What must be this other allele that he inherited from the other parent? He must have blue because he made a blue-eyed person. So where did my parents get each of these genes from? My parents have 2 copies. Where did they get those from? Their parents, my grandparents. I don't know which ones, but I think my dad's mom had blue eyes. I don't know what my mom's parents had. So here's me. What must I have inherited from my father? Did I inherit the blue-eyed gene or the green-eyed gene? I had to have inherited blue eyes from my dad. And what must I have inherited from my mom? Why? Well, one, John, yeah, you need 2 blues. I mean, I clearly have blue eyes. I'm not wearing contacts. But does my mom have anything else to offer? That's all she's got. And so for me, I inherited a blue-eye gene from both parents, and that's the only way that you can have blue eyes. And so for those of you in the room that have blue eyes, that is also you. Now, my sister, her name is Jennifer. She has green eyes. So she has this allele. Let's say we don't know what the other one is. We have to look at her children, but my sister has green eyes. So let me ask you guys this. Does it matter if she had this or this? It doesn't matter. She has green. What it does matter, she definitely does not have that, or else she would have brown. Follow? Now, my sister has children, so this is going to help us figure out what my sister is. Her husband's name is Scott. Scott has brown eyes, so he has that capital A. I don't know what the other one is. We need to look at their 2 daughters who are freshmen at Robinson. So here's their daughters, Cameron and Lauren. Cameron has green eyes. So what must Cameron have inherited from Jen? The green-eyed allele. And what must Scott have in order to produce a green-eyed Cameron? Let's put it this way. What must this other one not be? If it was brown, let's just say, don't write that in. If it was brown, what's the only thing you could have passed on to Cameron? And what would Cameron be? She would have brown eyes, but she's not. So this one is going to be either green or blue. We don't know. But what I do know is that Cameron has one or the other. Now, Lauren has brown eyes. So what does she inherit from Scott? Brown. What does she inherit from Jen? Either this or this. I don't know. But now look at me. Here's my wife. She has blue eyes. So what are the only genes that she should have from her parents? Blue and blue. And if we have a child, what is the only possibility? Yeah. I mean, we've already settled on that. Like our offspring has no choice but to be blue-eyed. She has blue, I have blue. That's genetics. That's heredity. And this is kind of stuff that we're going to be doing throughout the year. But here's what I want you guys to gather from the law of segregation before I run out of time. How many copies of the blue-eyed gene do I have? How many will I pass on? That is the law of segregation. They separate. my 100% is going to separate into 50-50. And that is the law of segregation. You will pass on half of what you have. They separate during meiosis. All right. We will do a lot